Imagine a country that's the size of New York State, but has a population greater than all of Russia. Seems impossible, right? But that's Bangladesh for you. And in this video, we're going to see just how this tiny nation became one of the fastest growing economies on Earth. You ever look at a map and notice that country tucked right between India and Myanmar? That's Bangladesh. Now, it might seem small, but for hundreds of years, this place was like a prize everyone wanted. And before it was Bangladesh, it was known as Bengal. Believe it or not, way back in the day, several European geographers thought this spot was literally paradise on Earth. And that's because for a time, Bengal really was one of the wealthiest places in all of India. Its early history was a mix of different empires, a bunch of squabbles, and a tug of war between Hinduism and Buddhism. But all of that was just a warm-up for a massive change that happened around the 12th century when Islam swept across northern India. A man named Muhammad Bakhtiar brought a tiny army of just 20 men, and somehow they managed to take over Bengal using a bold and clever strategy. We're not exactly sure what that means, but it worked. And for the next few centuries, this region was a pretty big deal. In the 14th century, 3 big city-states popped up, which were later united into the Bengal Sultanate. Then, in the 17th century, the mighty Mughal Empire took control. Under their rule, everything seemed to get a turbo boost. Art and literature were huge, trade routes expanded, and Bengal became a major player in worldwide trade. But that's also when some new players showed up, mainly the Europeans. The Portuguese showed up first, but they got kicked out. Then, in the 1600s, the British East India Company arrived. They were just a trading company, but they slowly started to take over. Their big moment came in 1757, after a battle called the Battle of Plassey. Siraj-ud-Dawla, one of the local rulers, got mad and attacked a British settlement, even stuffing a bunch of people into a tiny cellar. So, a British clerk named Robert Clive, who was a total powerhouse, fought back and won. After that, the British government eventually took full control, and Bengal became the first part of India to be under their thumb. After that, the British built new things, like roads, schools, and a whole new social system. But a lot of historians say their policies also kind of bled the region dry. This caused a huge problem between the Hindu and Muslim populations. The Hindus agreed to work with the British, so they learned English and went to British schools. But the Muslims were not for it, and they often rebelled when things went bad. This created a deep divide that would change everything. Fast forward to 1947. World War II was over, and it was clear the British had to leave. But what would happen to the millions of Muslims living in India? The solution was to create a brand new country just for them, Pakistan. But Pakistan wasn't one piece. It was split into 2 parts, specifically West Pakistan and East Pakistan, and between them was the whole country of India. East Pakistan was basically the little sibling. It was far away and treated unfairly by the leaders in the West. They didn't have much in common besides their religion. And to make things worse, the government tried to force everyone to speak Urdu, the language of the West. That was the last straw for the people of East Pakistan, who spoke Bangla and were proud of their culture. This lit a fire under them, and their fight to keep their language turned into a fight for their freedom. The tension finally exploded in 1971, when a political party called the Awami League, which was all about Bengali nationalism, won the national election. But the president of Pakistan didn't approve. So, riots broke out, and the leaders of East Pakistan declared their independence, renaming their country Bangladesh. In response, the Pakistani army came in hard, and what followed was a brutal war. Bangladeshis today still call it a genocide. Millions of people ran for their lives into India, and eventually, India stepped in to help. It was one of the shortest and bloodiest wars ever. But with India on their side, the Pakistani army was quickly defeated. In just 11 days it was over, and on December 16th, 1971, the world got a new country. Bangladesh. The guy who started it all, Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, became the first Prime Minister. And just a few years later, in 1975, the military took over. And that started a whole series of military governments and coups. It was a pretty bumpy road, with different political parties taking over and then being overthrown. This went on for a long time, until 1991, when the country finally returned to a full-on democratic system. For almost 2 decades after that, the 2 main political parties, the Awami League and the Bangladesh Nationalist Party, or BNP for short, basically took turns being in charge. Which brings us to the present. Because the political situation has been pretty intense recently, the country saw a massive, unexpected change in 2024 when the government was removed and an interim government took over. It's now led by a Nobel Peace Prize winner named Muhammad Yunus. Needless to say, this has been a huge shift, and a lot of people around the world are watching to see how this transition plays out. So, with all that political turbulence, how has the economy managed? But first, how big is the economy we're even talking about? For the last 20 years, Bangladesh has been a real success story, growing at an average of about 6.25% every single year. And in 2024, the country's GDP was $450 billion. It's had such a fast growth rate that the country is on track to graduate from the UN's list of least developed countries in 2026. But here's the reality check. Even with all that growth, the country has been facing some economic headwinds lately. Because while it bounced back quickly from the COVID-19 pandemic, things have gotten a bit shaky since the big political changes. And here's what I mean by that. For the fiscal year of 2025, economic growth is projected to be between 3% and 5%, which is a noticeable slowdown. Some international groups like the World Bank are even more cautious, forecasting growth at around 3.3%. And one of the biggest problems is inflation. The prices of things are going up and up, with projections saying it could be over 10% in 2025. This makes things really tough for families, especially when it comes to essential things like food. And speaking of tough challenges, the country is also dealing with big financial pressures. Foreign reserves, which are like the country's savings account, have fallen from $33 billion in 2022 to around $14.5 billion in mid-2025. That's a huge drop and raises some worries about economic stability. So now that the bad news is out of the way, let's look at the bright side. One of the biggest parts of the economy is the garment industry. And in the fiscal year 2025, this industry brought in a massive $39.35 billion in exports. The industry is so important that it accounts for over 80% of Bangladesh's total export earnings. So let's pause and think about that for a second. Because that's a lot of clothes. The country is also making a push for more green energy. The government has a goal to get 20% of its electricity from renewable sources by 2030. Which honestly sounds great, but they've got a lot of work to do since they only hit about 5% by 2025. But beyond clothes and energy, there's another bright spot: healthcare. Experts believe the country's healthcare market will grow to an impressive $23 billion by 2033. But right now, there's a big need for more services, with only one hospital bed for every 1,000 people, and not a lot of health insurance coverage. So, where is all this headed? The next few months are going to be really important. The new government is trying to fix the economy, and the country is preparing for a new election, which is supposed to happen in February 2026. Okay, we just talked about how Bangladesh became its own country and how it is economically right now. But what does this place actually look like? Well, imagine a country that is almost entirely one giant, flat, watery playground. Bangladesh is located in South Asia, bordered on 3 sides by India and a little bit by Myanmar, and on the other by the beautiful Bay of Bengal. It's not a huge country, coming in at about 144,000 square kilometres, or about 55,600 square miles. Now, why is it so flat? Most of Bangladesh sits on a massive delta created by some of the world's biggest rivers. I'm talking about the Ganges and the Brahmaputra rivers, which both start way up in the Himalayas and flow thousands of miles to meet right here. They merge into an even bigger river called the Padma, and then it joins up with another big one, the Meghna, before finally emptying into the Bay of Bengal. This huge river system is the country's lifeblood. It's why the soil is so incredibly rich and green, perfect for growing crops. But while there are upsides, there's also a downside. And in this case, because everything is so low, a lot of the country is barely above sea level. The capital city, Dhaka, is only about 7.6 metres or 25 feet above sea level. This makes the country vulnerable to seasonal flooding, which can be both a blessing and a major challenge. Which naturally begs the question, is all of Bangladesh flat like a giant pancake? Well, Not quite. While most of the country is flat delta, there are a couple of spots where the land rises up a bit. In the northeast, you'll find the hilly Sylhet region, which is famous for its lush green tea plantations. Then in the southeast, you have the Chittagong Hill Tracts. This area is a series of rolling ridges along the border with India and Myanmar. Some of these hills can get pretty tall, with peaks reaching over 1,000 metres, or about 3,300 feet. Now let's talk about the weather and wildlife. Being so close to the equator, Bangladesh has a tropical climate with 3 main seasons. The first is a cool, dry winter from October to March. Then things heat up from March to May, with average temperatures around 29 degrees Celsius, or about 84 degrees Fahrenheit. But the real action starts from May to September, during the monsoon season. This is when almost 80% of the country's yearly rainfall happens. It gets super humid, but all that rain turns the landscape into a vibrant, brilliant green. Now, moving past the landscapes, what about the people? What is daily life like, and what traditions do they hold dear? Well, to put it simply, Bangladesh is a country bursting with culture and tradition. First, let's look at who calls this place home. Bangladesh is a hugely populated country with over 173 million people, which is about 2.1% of the world's population. And guess what? 98% of the people here are ethnic Bengalis, a group that shares a common language, Bangla. The other 2% are made up of smaller, distinct ethnic groups, which adds to the country's rich tapestry of people. But besides its ethnic background, this place has a deep, rich heritage that you can see everywhere. In the buildings, the art, the music, and the clothes. So let's start with their beliefs. Because of its history, the 3 main religions here are Islam, Hinduism, and Buddhism. They have all had a big influence on daily life. In fact, about 91% of the population identifies as Muslim, making it one of the largest Muslim countries in the world. Then, when it comes to art, the people of Bangladesh have a serious creative streak. The first known examples of their literature are over 1,000 years old. Over time, famous poets and writers have added to this amazing collection of stories and poetry. And that creativity extends to music and dance, which are a huge part of life here. You can break down the music into 3 main types: classical, folk, and modern. Classical music is often played with traditional instruments like bamboo flutes and wooden drums. Then you have folk music, which is all about local stories, love, and spiritual themes. And of course, there's modern music, especially in the big cities like Dhaka, where local bands mix traditional sounds with Western rock and pop. Dance is also a big deal, so in the countryside, girls often dance to popular folk songs, just letting the rhythm move them. Now, what about what people wear? While you'll see a lot of modern clothing in urban areas, traditional garments are still very popular, especially in the countryside. For women, the sari is a classic choice. It's a long piece of cloth that's beautifully draped to form a skirt and top. A lot of these are made from incredibly fine, world-famous quilted patchwork. Now for men, the traditional outfit is a knee-length cotton dress called a Punjabi, which they often wear, with cotton shirts called fatuas. So now that we can picture what it's like living there, let's talk about my favourite thing: food. The cuisine here is a real melting pot of flavours, with dishes for special festivals and specific seasons. The go-to meal for most people is simple but delicious. Rice served with various dishes like fish, eggs, curries, and lentil soup. The national fish, called hilsa, is a must-have for special occasions. And if you're ever in Bangladesh, you have to try some of the amazing snacks and sweets, like payesh, a sweet rice pudding, or jalmuri, a spicy, crispy mix that's a favourite for both kids and adults. What a journey, right? We've travelled through time, crossed rivers and plains, and explored the rich history, politics, and culture of Bangladesh. Now, after watching this, what's the one thing you thought you knew about Bangladesh that this video completely changed your mind about? Could be the economy, their history, or even their culture. Whatever it is, let me know in the comments section below. And as always, if you loved this video, you're going to enjoy this next one.